Hey, Rhetorical Rockstars, welcome back. This is the third video in this series, and it's the first of four that I'm going to do on argumentation, in which we will go over just the essential elements of argumentation, building upon what we should already know about rhetoric. So obviously, an effective argument is going to be, is going to rely on effective use of rhetoric, but then there are other elements of argumentation in and of itself that are important as well. So just to be official about it, remember that this is material that I have drawn from our textbook in class, The Language of Composition, Reading, Writing, and Rhetoric, as well as added some of my own thoughts and ideas too as we move forward. So let's take a look at the basics of argumentation, which we should probably start with a definition. I want to start this definition not with what argumentation is, but what argumentation is not, because a lot of us have probably had, well, all of us have had the experience of arguing with people, especially with our families, siblings and all that stuff. And probably for a lot of us, the first thing that comes to mind with argumentation is that moment with your sibling or with your parent when you want something and they want something else, and it gets heated and emotional and there's yelling and sometimes hitting and fighting and pushing and all that. That's not what we're talking about here. So when we talk about argumentation in a rhetoric class, we are not talking about yelling and belittling. Our goal in argumentation is to get people to change their mind. And the more kind of, I guess, violent we are about that, the more likely we are to force other people into their own viewpoints and to reinforce our viewpoints and for nobody then to change their minds. So arguing is not yelling and belittling. Arguing is also not what we would call crazed rhetoric. So we will often hear public figures making arguments in public places using rhetoric to make certain arguments that include things like exaggerated assertions. So you take one possible result of somebody's point of view and you blow it out of proportion. Or scanty evidence, you just make claims and don't provide the evidence or provide very little evidence or provide untrustworthy, uncredible evidence, which leads to the third thing, uncredible sources, people who might sound good or look good on the surface, but really have problems underneath that. An argument is also never zero sum. So there's never an us versus them, or a black or a white, or a right and a wrong, or a yes or a no. There's never a winner or a loser, so much as an argument should take all possibilities into account. So then, if it's not those things, then what is an argument? An argument is, for our case sakes and purposes, the process of reasoned inquiry and rational discourse, so that we're reasoning through the questions that we have about a certain topic. We have rational discussions about that, and hopefully through that, then we all come to agreement about how to approach a certain topic or a certain problem, which means that an argument is as much about convincing others of your point of view, persuading others of your point of view, which is always the primary purpose of rhetoric, right? As it is about them being able to persuade you to see things from their point of view and coming to some kind of, mutually agreed upon conclusion. The problem with the other way of arguing, the exaggerated assertions and scanty evidence and uncredible sources and zero-sumness, is something that, especially recently as of the recording of this particular presentation, we've seen a lot, and that's something that we call partisanship. Partisanship is when you've got some people on one side and other people on the other side. Maybe it has more than just two sides, but let's stick with just two for now. And never the twain shall meet. If one side is for something, the other side is against something, and they can't talk to each other and agree upon certain things. And that's what we don't want. So crazed rhetoric, yelling and belittling, and all the things that go underneath that lead to partisanship. And that's what we're trying to avoid through the effective operation of argumentation. So what should we do instead of all the things that I just went over not doing? Well, there's a list of advice that I have for us when we argue. First of all, we need to be able to negotiate, compromise, and cooperate, which should be built right off of what I was just saying earlier, that if argumentation is the process of reasoned inquiry and rational discourse, talking to each other with reason and rationality, then we have to be willing to negotiate, we have to be willing to compromise, which means that we have to recognize when there are certain things that we can let go of, and we have to be willing to cooperate no matter who we're arguing with. We also have to be able to balance our opinion with authority, which means that if there is some greater authority than us that's giving us, reasonable, accountable, and well-established ideas that oppose our own opinions, then we have to be able to see our opinions as separate and probably compromise or negotiate those opinions. Third, we have to be able to bring the opposition into the dialogue. We can't have it as our goal to shut other people down. The moment that we shut other people down, we get into that area of crazed rhetoric and partisanship, of yelling and belittling, and then the argument falls apart. You're never going to get the compromise that you need, the negotiation or the cooperation that you need. Third, we have to make clear, realistic claims. We may have an ideal pie in the sky vision for what we want everybody to do, or everybody to believe, or everybody to feel, but we also have to be realistic about the fact that our version of what we want isn't necessarily the version that we're going to get. Think compromise, right? And so we have to be able to make realistic claims that will bring everybody into the argument, and we have to be clear about what those claims are. Fifth, we need to be able to back up those claims with data, which means that, again, our idealism is something that we sometimes have to set aside if data doesn't support it. We may believe that the data may one day support what we think, but if it doesn't support it now, we have to be able to take a back seat in order to make our claims more clear and more realistic so that they can be supported with data, and we can get into that compromise and negotiation that we're looking for. And then we also finally, but ultimately we need to focus on positive outcomes. The more that we go into an argument wanting the other side to lose, then the less likely we are to win. We have to go into an argument understanding that both sides, or all sides of that argument, are going to need to come out of that argument feeling as though they have accomplished something, or that they have achieved something that otherwise they wouldn't have achieved if they hadn't participated in the argument. So we have to focus on what positive thing am I and all of the other people participating in the argument going to take out of the argument. Finally, we want to ensure a logical progression for our argument. So if we want to be able to accomplish all of these things that I'm talking about, then our clear claim needs to probably be followed up, or definitely needs to be followed up by evidence and by elaboration. We have to have a logical progression to our argument. We can't be skipping around from thing to thing to thing, responding and putting out fires. We have to take our argument through logic. So if we start off with an if, then, therefore statement, which could be a claim or a thesis, then that establishes our clear claim, and it gives us momentum to move forward with evidence and elaboration. The last thing that I want to bring up on this particular slide is this idea of what a Rogerian argument is, because that's essentially what we're talking about. Again, this is a particular type of argumentation called Rogerian argumentation, which requires a full understanding of the opposition before you can refute the opposition and make accommodations with the opposition. So it's important that we think of arguments in this way. It's not a win or a lose. It's not in order to cement one side against the other side. It's an opportunity to understand and bring everybody into a discussion in order to have come to a rational and mutually positive outcome for everybody. The last thing that I want to bring up is that the only way that this can be done is if we use rhetoric thoughtfully, creatively, and effectively. And that means understanding our rhetorical situation, as well as then using ethos, logos, and pathos effectively as we're arguing with the other side in order to assert our own values and our own ideas, but also to make the compromises needed so that everybody can come out of the situation positively. So we will be practicing this in the future. Be on the lookout for ways in which we will do that.